It's not just Elon Musk and millennials on Reddit who've invested heavily into cryptocurrency. Governments are starting to get involved too. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at El Salvador's Bitcoin experiment, which is going about as well as you'd expect, and how El Salvador's economy might recover. If you like explainers like this, which dive into the details and drama of global politics and news, then be sure to subscribe. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram for even shorter explainers, so you too can stay informed while you scroll. We really appreciate your support. So to understand this story, you need a bit of context. For most of its democratic history, which really begins in 1992 with the Chapultepec Peace Accords, El Salvador's politics has been dominated by two parties. The left-leaning FMLN, successor to a guerrilla movement that won the Salvadoran Civil War in the 80s, and the right-leaning Arena Party, which defended the military-led junta government in the same war. While these parties maintained a duopoly on Salvadoran politics, they weren't actually that popular. Both were relatively impotent and ridden with corruption. For the last 20 years or so, under both Arena and FMLN governments, GDP growth has averaged less than 2% a year. Poverty has risen, and El Salvador became the most murderous country in the world. Various politicians, including 3 of the last 4 presidents, have been investigated for corruption, usually to do with the street gangs that run parts of the country. This is something you sort of need to know to understand El Salvadoran politics. El Salvador has a serious gang problem. There are an estimated 60,000 gang members in El Salvador, about 1% of the population, and it has some of the highest rates of serious violence in the world. El Salvador's murder rate has fluctuated between about 40 and 80 per 100,000 people for most of the last 20 years, reaching a high of 100 in 2015. For context, that's about 20 times that of the United States, and nearly 100 times that of the UK. Anyway, this two-party duopoly finally started crumbling in 2017, with the advent of Nuevas Ideas, a sort of populist centre-right party founded by President Bukele. Bukele was originally a member of the left-leaning FMLN and mayor of San Salvador, the capital and largest city of El Salvador. Bukele was elected mayor in 2015 and was remarkably popular with San Salvadorans, largely because he successfully reduced crime in the city. In his first year in office, the murder rate saw a fall of 50%, which Bukele attributed to his tough anti-crime policies, including an increased police and military presence on the streets and tighter security in jails. Although it's worth noting that there were reports that Bukele had made an informal deal with the gangs. Bukele also won over voters with projects to revitalise poor neighbourhoods, progressive stances on social issues such as gay marriage, and shrewd use of social media. He even donated his salary to provide scholarships for poor students. Throughout his mayoralty, Bukele enjoyed approval ratings of above 70% and soon became the most popular politician in the country. Bukele was kicked out of FMLN in 2017, in part because the party leadership was intimidated by his popularity, and announced his intention to run for president in 2019. Bukele won the 2019 presidential election by a landslide, winning 53% of the vote, well ahead of both of the mainstream candidates. Once in power, Bukele turned into a bit of an autocrat, albeit an effective one. Allegedly, thanks to some dodgy deals between Bukele's government and the gangs, gang warfare had subsided and the murder rate had fallen by 60%. When the number of killings briefly jumped in April, Bukele responded harshly. He tweeted that police could kill gangsters to defend themselves or others, ending the policy of keeping the two main gangs apart in prisons, which had been in place since 2004. And his press office released humiliating photos of gangsters huddled together in prison. But when a journalist started investigating the alleged deals, he was expelled from the country, and a spurious money laundering investigation was launched into his newspaper. When the legislature hesitated to pass a rather expensive budget for his crime-fighting programme, he stormed the parliament with a whole load of armed soldiers. His extreme COVID policies, which included draconian containment centres for travellers and using soldiers to arrest people and throw them into strict 30-day quarantine, worked relatively well and were popular with the Salvadoran public. but were eventually declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. In response, Bukele told officials to continue with the policies anyway, and in May 2021, after his New Ideas Party won a massive majority in the February legislative elections, Bukele replaced 5 of the country's 15 top judges and the Attorney General with his mates, before passing another law in August which would sack all judges over the age of 60. That law contained a woolly proviso that said that the term limit could be waived due to reasons of necessity or specialty, implying that judges could keep their jobs if they listened to Bukele. Not coincidentally, 3 days later, the top court announced that, contrary to the constitution, a sitting president can run for re-election, clearing the way for Bukele 2024. Bukele has also crammed the government with his family. His uncle is Commerce Secretary, his cousin is president of the party, and the father of his godson runs the Export Promotion Agency. But Bukele's authoritarian tilt doesn't seem to have affected his approval ratings, which hover at around 90%. Buoyed by his high approval ratings, on September the 7th of last year, Bukele passed a law recognising Bitcoin as legal tender, requiring businesses to accept the cryptocurrency for goods and services, and ordered the Salvadoran treasury to buy 400 Bitcoin, then worth about $21 million. Over the next few months, El Salvador bought a total of about 1,400 Bitcoin, and Bukele announced a $1 billion Bitcoin bond issuance to fund a low-tax Bitcoin city next to Colchagua volcano. Now, Bitcoin wasn't necessarily a bad idea. A diaspora of some 2 million Salvadorans sent remittances worth 20% of GDP home each year, and wallet-to-wallet Bitcoin transfers will be faster and cheaper than traditional wire transfers. It's also not like El Salvador were giving up their monetary sovereignty. The country has used US dollar as the exclusive legal tender since 2002, and perhaps most obviously, if Bitcoin goes up in value, then El Salvador gets richer. And, well, for the first few months, things looked like they were going all right. Bitcoin's price jumped from about $45,000 in September to a high of nearly $70,000 in November. El Salvador's borrowing costs stabilised, and there was a brief jump in remittances. But, well, things have started going downhill, and pretty fast. As I'm sure some of you retail crypto investors have noticed, Bitcoin's price has plummeted over the last couple of months. As of Monday, Bitcoin is currently trading at about $33,500, about 50% down on its November high. Fleeing investors have pushed El Salvador's borrowing costs up to all-time highs. Its 2023 bond now has a real interest rate of 35%. The state has some hefty debt payments coming up, and Moody's downgraded El Salvador's credit rating to B-. In a move that was unlikely to calm investors' nerves, Bukele tweeted that El Salvador had decided to buy the dip with another 410 bitcoins. Essentially, as Bitcoin's price has fallen, investor confidence in El Salvador has collapsed, and if Bitcoin continues to fall, it's hard to see how El Salvador's finances will survive, especially without the $1.3 billion loan currently being negotiated with the IMF, which has been thrown up in the air thanks to Bukele's unorthodox economics. But will this affect Bukele's approval ratings? Well, possibly. The policy was never popular. According to polling in July, 2/3 of Salvadorans were not willing to be paid in Bitcoin, and just under half knew nothing about it. And Bitcoin's slump might put fiscal limits on Bukele's most popular policies, which include food parcels and free computers for kids. But so far there's not much sign of this. The latest poll from December the 15th gives him an approval rating of 85%. Slightly down on the dizzying heights of his usual 90 to 95%, but still one of the highest in the world. Ultimately though, Bukele's sky-high approval ratings could spell bad news for El Salvador. If he doesn't face any political pushback, there's nothing stopping Bukele from continuing to risk the fate of an entire economy on a cryptocurrency. But what do you think? Is Bitcoin a good long-term bet? And will Bukele eventually be vindicated? Or is he turning the entire country into a meme economy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Remember, you can also join the conversation on Twitter and Instagram, where we post even more often than we do on YouTube. Check out our pages for regular updates and clear explainer graphics so you can stay informed while you scroll. Thanks for your support. As always, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers for making videos like this one possible, and if you want to see your name at the end of videos just like these people, then be sure to back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description below.